what happened 2 years ago in downtown Brattleboro with Tropical Storm Irene. And we all know that recovery is not something that happens instantaneously, that this is a long and drawn-out process. And also the thing that I want to make sure everyone understands is this team that we have put together isn't here to come and dictate to you and tell you what to do. You're here to listen. So we appreciate the fact that you've taken time to come and give input. And then they're going to make recommendations, suggestions, and so forth based on the input that we hear today. The other thing I'd like to really encourage everyone here to do, if they can possibly in their schedules, we have a public input meeting tonight at 5 o'clock at the Latchis, and then on Wednesday we have a 10 a.m. meeting where all these suggestions, ideas, and so forth will come back to a presentation for you guys, and we'll want your input on that as well. So that input process never ends. So with that, thank you again for coming out. We'll go around the room and introduce various members of the team, but the first one I want to kind of point out here is Kurt Muldrow. He's our team leader here. He's from outside the state of Vermont, so you'll hear a very interesting accent from Mr. Muldrow today. But he was key in some of the recovery efforts that took place along the Mississippi Gulf Coast after Katrina. So a lot of the members of this team understand what it's like and how long a process it does take to come back from where you were. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Trip, and then I know we'll go around the room and kind of introduce ourselves.
Great, thanks, Ian. Thank you for the introduction. We are here to listen, and we will have some questions for you before we dive in. Let's just go ahead and introduce ourselves, and then I'll have my teammates introduce yourselves and your areas of expertise as well when we get to you. So,
okay, Carol Lott, Recreational Parks Director.
Gene Rand, Brattleboro Police.
Clayton Constant, Brattleboro Fire Chief.
Steve Merritt, Public Works.
David Garden, Student Select Board.
Karen Malone, Parking Enforcement.
yes, please.
David Bowman, Engineering Ventures from Burlington, Planning and Civil Engineering.
Dave Scholes, Select Board.
Patrick Moreland, I'm the interim town manager.
Tim Johnson, WTSA Radio.
Good morning, Jacob Roberts, BaBB and local business owner.
Donna McIntyre, Brattleboro Select Board. I'm Kate O'Connor, and earlier you saw me as something else, but now I'm here as the Select Board.
And I'm Tom McGilloway, part of the team, planning, urban design, landscape architecture.
Dr. Francis Blanchard,
I'm sorry, I've never introduced myself. I'm Leanne Tingay, and I'm with the state of Vermont, Vermont Downtown Program.
Jim Brazino, I'm BaBB, and I'm also on the Planning Commission and local business.
Bill Knowles, a friend.
Anybody in the back? There, yes, one, two,
Pal Sam, I've been over there. I'm just listening.
this seems welcome.
Well, thank you all for coming. We've had one meeting with some key property owners downtown already this morning. This is sort of our first big round table. There's a property owners meeting going on over there at the moment too. We're trying to double up because we have a very large team. And we will regroup amongst the team and compare notes through the day. So really, I guess what we're interested in hearing from you is we're bringing with us, architects, civil engineer, landscape architects, market folks, grant specialists. Stephanie Francis is here. She's in the back, but she's also running interference as people come in to make sure they get to the right group. And the next 3 days are going to be very intensive for us. So we're here to learn from you and hear what you feel like are some of the key issues. We've already talked with some of you on some of the things you want us looking at. Maybe that's a great place to start the conversation, and then we can move from there. We've already heard some great things on parking enforcement this morning, and so about how thorough it is, and I have personal experience because this is the only town I've ever worked in across the United States where Hertz has actually followed up with me and given me an additional fee. So you do a great job. But maybe we can start with what you feel like are some of the things you really want to see come out of this. And certainly we're here to answer questions if we need to elaborate on what we're able to do as well. So I'm going to take it over to you.
Thank you, Tripp. So I can just say very briefly that Tripp and Leanne and several of their sort of consultants were here maybe about 2 months ago.
June.
Around June, and it was sort of a preliminary setup for these types of discussions. You know, at that point in time, we sat down and with them, and they kind of offered the same sort of thing, which was, so, you know, what do you see going on in downtown, and what kind of things would you like to see? What kind of things would you like to have assistance on in terms of assessing and looking at? And I can recall at that point in time, Rod Francis and I were sort of walking back to the Municipal Center, and, you know, ideas were sort of flying. And what we came up with at that point in time was a couple of things. One, we were seeking some assistance in terms of assessing our parking capacity downtown. So, for example, do we have enough capacity? And if so, do we have the appropriate breakdown between short-term capacity and long-term capacity, or should it be structured somewhat differently? So that was one of the things that we sort of highlighted. Another, and I'm glad to see that you're here, was to assist us with developing a sort of more enhanced capital maintenance plan for those lots.
That's exactly why he's here.
By the way, when we went around the room, I was delighted to see you.
We're meeting at 11, right?
Yes, sir, we are. So, you know, assisting us with helping to identify priorities within our maintenance. We've got a lot of infrastructure downtown. Not all of it's very new, and in trying to assess priorities, particularly with respect to safety, and then needed repairs, I think some technical assistance would be very, very helpful. And so I know later on today at 11 o'clock we've got a little bit more of an in-depth discussion on some of those issues, but that's kind of where we started a few months back. There's obviously a great deal going on downtown right now, which we're very fortunate to have. Hasn't been that way for a couple of years. Obviously, we can see what's going on across the street, and that's a positive development to the tune of about $24 million. But in addition to that, we've got some other developments coming in the next year, one of which is we're redoing the sidewalks on this side of the road from the bridge down here on the way to New Hampshire, all the way up to the corner up here by Subway. That's going to be a very intense project. It's going to be engaging a lot of property owners and business owners and shop owners and local residents, and so that's some interesting goings on. Maybe see how that fits in to what you're hearing in the broader community.
Is that's on the east side of Main Street?
East side, yes, sir.
And does that include other streetscape elements, or is it just sidewalks?
Steve could probably speak to that a little better. I know there are some provisions for greenery. And I think there may be some sort of decorative elements involved in that as well. Some decorative, some sort of practical, some sort of paving stones. But again, Steve could...
It's pretty much the sidewalk from Main Street Bridge up to the subway to Walnut Street. It does include amenities such as the trees, streetscape. The street lighting will remain pretty much the same. The poles will be changed to more of a flat black. So we don't have enough resources in particular grant to put in town-owned street lights, decorative, ornamental type.
And is the plan the other side of Main Street would occur in a future day, or?
Some of the other side of Main Street was done during the traffic light and road improvement projects. Although it's open to, like, there's a brick veneer that's going to be utilized to enhance the sidewalk on the curb side. That could be added at any time on the west side in the sections where the sidewalk has already been reviewed. So it could enhance some of it at a later date.
And I think the streetlights, they're less than 2 years old, or about 2 years old at this point.
That's right.
I guess from a select board perspective, what do you feel like are some priorities that we need to look at downtown, knowing that you are enjoying some very significant investment, have had some significant investment, or as just general, where do you see the next steps heading? And then I think related to that too, even looking even further down the road, as Vermont and New Hampshire work out the bridge issue and some of these other longer term things, what are some of those things we need to be contemplating as well? So short term and long term.
From a very broad perspective, the challenges that I think the select board has to deal with have to do mostly with revenue generation and investing in aging infrastructure. And we have, I think, very significant challenges arising from our status as the regional economic hub. So I think that there's been a shift in the last generation or two where commercial activity and nonprofit activity, social service activity, all is concentrated within Brattleboro Regional Economic Hub. And we have to provide municipal services to support all of the population for the county, or this part of the county that comes in to use those services, but we can't raise revenue from many of the businesses that are in town based upon their nonprofit status. So we have the schools, we have the hospitals, we have the doctor's offices, and the taxing structure at the state level allows for revenue generation from real estate taxes, rooms and meals, alcohol, and sales tax. And we have invested $32 million in the wastewater treatment facility. That was a big, big project, but we had to turn immediately from there to upgrades to the police fire. And in order to fund the police fire, we've got a bond, and we tried to look for an alternate revenue source, but the only one that remained was the 1% option local sales tax. And it created a tension, I think, between our effort at the government level and many of the taxpayers, residential taxpayers in town, who tried to see the cost shifted, and the merchants downtown, who don't feel that they can make a go of it if there's an extra 1% sales tax added to the state tax, given that we're a river town, particularly because we're competing with New Hampshire. So we've seen a lot of commercial activity concentrated right across the river, and we've got a lot of pressure on local merchants who can't make a go of it. A lot of people feel they've got to go to New Hampshire in order to get basic essentials. And people go to New Hampshire and shop regularly, and we've seen a little bit of that in the types of businesses that are located downtown at this point, mostly artisan shops downtown. We're lucky that Brown Roberts remains downtown. And I think, from my perspective, there needs to be re-examination at the state level of the way in which revenue can be generated at the municipal level, particularly for regional economic hubs, because all across the state, regional economic hubs have the most intense tax burdens, and we need more leeway and more options to try to raise revenue in order to provide those services that are necessary given the nature of the town and the services we have to provide. That's very different from parking lots.
Well, I think it's because our team we've worked in Rutland, so we know that issue that's sort of facing Rutland, similar issue. And we've also worked in Springfield, and Springfield has that same Connecticut River issue where Claremont ends up having all the shopping, just a short drive away. So it puts an immense challenge. Of course, you have Hinsdale, which is nudged up right next to you. Claremont at least is a 15-20 minute drive from Springfield. So very aware of those Connecticut River issues and the Vermont specific issues. So appreciate you bringing those up.
John Allen, by the way, I missed the introductions. I'm on the select board. Mine is more of a long range. David's is more of the immediate, financial burden that we have. Mine has always been, and again, this is just one of 5, that Brattleboro faces the wrong way. That we do not capitalize on a beautiful river that we have. And so that's where I would like to see a little bit of our future going through. You know, definitely long range. It's nothing that's going to happen overnight. I've just always thought that that is such an asset for Brattleboro, and we don't utilize it at all. So that's...
We had dinner last night at the restaurant.
Yep.
Whetstone.
The Whetstone?
And I mean, there's no better way to get it than to be dining at the Whetstone and go up to the beer garden and overlook the river and realize it's one of the most magnificent views of
It's
any
a
city.
wonderful view,
Right.
you know, with having Wantasket right there in a nice little bowl. I would just like to see somehow how we can improve that, you know, reroute traffic. And again, this has been talked about for years, you know, somehow utilizing the base of Wantasket as one road and then down here by the railroad tracks to alleviate the pressure that we have on downtown Brattleboro, traffic-wise with the trucks. But just what you were saying a minute ago, that sitting up there with that beautiful view and we don't utilize it, just kind of drives me crazy. But, you know, that's how Brattleboro was formed. And so I would just like to see somehow how we can incorporate that into the future.
I think, Tom, you're pretty familiar with that, being from Baltimore.
Oh, geez. What a great job they did there.
The railroad right away, does that go all the way to the waterfront, or is there?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a
high tension line.
High tension power line as well.
Which can go underground. I mean, there's ways of getting
There's ways of doing it. Yeah.
ways of doing that.
Other issues, yes.
Becky Jones, I'm a physician in town. I do pay taxes. I don't know, probably a lot of you know that they're really working a lot on a bike path that would go, they're trying to make it go along the river. So obviously that would be a great asset. And so I think the more we can get support for that, the better. And then I'm on the board of the museum, and of course the museum is working on that vista there. So I think there is a lot of energy around the river.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who could agree with you more? I mean, it's so true. So I think the more support we have as a town for those projects, the better. And I'm also a big fan of pedestrian traffic, and I think that's really, I see that as the key. Get parking, you know, peripheral to the town, and then get shuttles in and bike paths and sidewalks, because you are going to get traffic, foot traffic, which is much more likely to buy stuff than if you're just driving through. So I'm a big fan of that.
I'd add to what John and Becky just said. John mentioned the truck traffic on Main Street. It's like it's been described as a river of steel. And I think that's pretty accurate. We're constrained by the federal regulations for what can go on the interstate as far as going around town. And we've got a huge employer, one of our largest businesses down the road. There's no other way they can get their trucks loaded with logs down to the mill. And the other thing is that I hear a lot from the public, particularly business people, is to attract people downtown. Some people say, oh, it's the parking. Some people say it's the lighting. There may be both of those things and other things, but it's, as Becky said, having people on foot does a lot more to promote those local businesses than driving by.
And there's a lot of traffic just through traffic. I mean, it's just going through onto the next.
I think one of the most important issues that my people as employees face is the detriment of when they go home, the parking lot on Flat Street. They have to go through a crowd of people who are very intimidating. Gentleman had a problem on Elliott Street a while ago in that condition, suggested the people avoid it. And I think there needs to be more of a police presence in the downtown area, especially at certain times. I think that's a big issue. Maybe these people are not threats, but they certainly appear to be threats.
Is there, how how is issues of loitering, or what are some of the things that you're doing, or how do you deal with that?
It's up and down, and it's area related. It changes from time to time, and it's groups that move around. We deal with it, we move them on, but when we push them from here, they go to there. So we'll get a complaint from Sam's because they're here. We'll push them on. We'll get a complaint from the high rise where they're down there on Elliott Street. So wherever we push them, they're going to hang around somewhere else. So, and it's one of those things you can only push so hard because we don't have a loitering ordinance. So they're free to do that, and we don't want to be the bullies and keep pushing for no reason.
Are there some areas in the downtown that are real hot spots that regularly occur, or are there any that don't stand out?
It's changing groups.
Okay.
So it changes from the Whetstone pathway. It changes from the bridge that goes over to Transportation Center. It's the Transportation Center itself. In front of Mocha Joe's, it's just, when the harmony, it changes, and the groups change.
Chief, is it more homeless?
Yeah.
Is it more homeless than it is just? No.
I think it's to that point. I think it's worth noting. My business is on Elm Street, which is between Elliott and Flat, where a lot of the quote-unquote loitering happens. And my observation in the past year and a half is that the vast majority of that group is sort of a teen young adult population. There are some adults that sit on a stoop all day long and don't seem like they have anything better to do with their day. But in terms of sheer numbers, you've got a sort of a lost generation that's just kind of hanging out, skateboarding, chasing each other, playing tag, sitting on the bus stoop all day long, doing what they do. And even on Gallery Walk, I'm a member of the Arts Council of Windham County, and there's been discussion of what do we do with all these teenagers on Friday night, because quite literally, again, it's sort of like you come out here on Friday night after 8 p.m., it's hundreds of teenagers and young adults. I mean, to some degree harmless, but they are running through traffic sometimes, and sometimes the language is foul or what have you, so there's an issue with that. So I think that could be turned into an opportunity for really engaging that demographic and getting them to be more productive citizens, if you want to put it in that light.
Well, I was curious too, because the team noticed yesterday the chalkboards that are up, and one of the things that struck me is that there was no foul language written on the chalkboards. Is that because there's someone checking, or is that because this is a successful?
Well, it may not be because someone's checking, but someone is checking regularly.
Okay.
So what they're
I just didn't know whether,
Check the fire hydrant across the street now. That's got graffiti all over it.
We were working on a project in my hometown, and one of the things the teens said is they want a wall where they can do graffiti without being arrested. It's just sort of let us have a place that is allowed to do this. So.
Yeah, I'm Bill Knowles. On this loitering thing, it is getting worse, and it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better unless we have a loitering law. We got to give the police the tools they need. Otherwise, we'll just keep moving them on. And I know that I call the police sometimes 3 times a day, and they come out and they move them on. So they do their job when you call them. If you don't call them and you just complain, nothing's going to happen. You have to pick up the phone and call. But until we have a loitering law, that's going to be ongoing, and it's going to get worse.
Jim Brasino, BaBB, and so I'm wondering, even if we do have a loitering law, people need somewhere to go, and to Jake's point, it feels to me like this is creative energy that needs an outlet. So, yes, we have the negative of loitering, but, I'd like to see a way to reframe the conversation into a positive of what do we do with all this energy that basically needs to be burned somewhere.
Skate park.
Thank you, John. Donna from the Brattleboro Select Board. I was going to say the same thing. I really love this opportunity because I feel like it gives us a proactive chance to go upstream and look at the complex tangle, the intersection of all the issues that are around the table. And I agree that the people that are, quote unquote, loitering are for the most part members of this community. And were there a way to plug in some productive, generative way, I don't doubt at all if we could provide some leadership for that would happen. So we may need to look at changing the laws, but we also may just need to tap into a source of creativity that we have not found yet. And I think this gives us the opportunity to do that.
Have sort of this care and stick approach.
Absolutely. That as we look at how the town is constructed, as we look at possibly utilizing the benefits of having this gorgeous river going through town, as we look at, you know, what people who run businesses here need, what the volunteer needs might be, there are some solutions that we've not yet discovered, and I think that's what we can do.
Is there a skate park in town? Or
That's a great question.
That's a really great question. Ask Carolyn.
There's one.
Obviously struck somewhere there.
There's the 800-pound elephant in the room.
It's a work in progress at this time.
Wow.
So the straight answer is there's no parking.
There's one in.
There's one in progress, but not currently.
Funds have been raised.
Working hard.
I'm sorry, I came in, I was sitting over there at that meeting, but I own the Market Block building where Taylor for Flowers and Maple Leaf Music is, and I'm the one who actually started early this morning talking about the problem with loitering. If you look at that building, because it has those little steps, we have tremendous trouble all the time. And Taylor for Flowers has put up with this for 30 some odd years, and Maple Leaf Music has put up with this for a long time, and the bar is out of business right now. That's in my building. We're looking for it. But that has been a huge problem. Even if I bring somebody to go look at the building, there's people like sitting all over the steps, there's coffee cups laying around, there's cigarette butts thrown on the floor, we're constantly cleaning. We put no littering signs up. We asked the police 1,000 times, please can you try and help us out? And really nothing has been really done. So they're constantly having to chase people away, and actually the loitering is impacting my building. All right, and it really has impacted.
The one thing is, as we plan and change, I mean, if you look at Main Street, years ago there was never benches and seating around. Now there is. That changes something for the police, because now you put a bench, you invite people to sit there. When does it turn from, I want you there, and now you're loitering? And as new benches go up, we need to deal with the sidewalks, how big they are, can the personal mobility devices get by, you know, we've got the signboard issue that's been around for a while. There's a whole lot of issues that need to be talked about and discussed, especially when you get around to loitering and putting seating there for people.
I just want to point out, I think that loitering involves a dynamic, and it's not all negative. There are a lot of people who come downtown and spend time downtown. I think in years past, there has been a much more intimidating and threatening feeling behind the loitering, and we acted as a select board to have the police patrolling, so in every shift, an officer spends an hour walking downtown. I think a lot of the fear that was associated with the loitering has dissipated. At least that's been my sense. I also would note, I've worked downtown. I'm here all the time. There has been a huge volume of pedestrian traffic through the town over this last summer that's had a somewhat different character. There's been a lot of out-of-state people, more than I've really noted in years past, coming through in huge volumes consistently all summer. And I think it really has spoken to the health and the vitality of downtown. I mean, we weathered the fire, we weathered the storm. Maybe I should put those in opposite direction for alliteration purposes. We weathered the storm, we weathered the fire. And I think the town is really on an upswing at this point. That's my personal view.
I would just echo a little bit about what David just said. Prior to my employment with the town of Brattleboro, I had an office on Main Street. And in years past, you know, Main Street was a busy, busy place. There was a period of time there for maybe 2 years where it seemed like things slowed down a little bit, but clearly they're rebounding. Clearly the amount of foot traffic and out-of-town foot traffic seems to be on the rise. And that's obviously having a positive impact, I think, on the general atmosphere, you know.
And having the colleges located in those buildings can only help that going forward with more local and more out-of-town traffic as well.
I can't say enough how, you know, after the college went into downtown Rutland, how that's impacted Merchants Row, and Small Dog Electronics has moved into downtown. I mean, they're getting these kind of investments as a result of having these students there.
If you've ever been trying to cook in your kitchen during a potluck or a gathering and everybody wants to hang out in the kitchen, you just want to turn around and say, just go be in the living room and hang out so I can do my work. You know, we don't have a living room. So that's one of the challenges. If you look at Burlington, I lived in Ithaca, New York for 5 years. There is a pedestrian mall. There's a place where the city actually says we have an area in which we want you to go and hang out. We want you to go and play your guitar, buy a cup of coffee, eat outside, carry along conversation. And I think that's one of the challenges is a lot of folks who are gravitated to being downtown, they have to find these little nooks to hang out because there really isn't ample space for a plaza or some sort of community living room, for a lack of a better term.
Also, we don't care about somebody sitting on a park bench that's been put on the street. When somebody's sitting on my steps that my tenant can't get in and out of the building, and they have to ask the person to please move, and then the person doesn't really want to move. That's the problem. It's a problem with egress into the building and out of the building. All right? I'm not talking about somebody sitting on a street or standing outside. That's a big thing. Those are people who come downtown to maybe spend money, or they're tourists or this. And I'm talking about people camping on the steps.
And I can certainly appreciate all the creative ability we have in this room now, but we keep on forgetting about how trashed our streets are because of cigarette butts and trash every morning. Elliott Street's probably the worst one. And everybody wants to speak up and see how creative we can be about how we do this and do that and spend money and do that and do that. Instead, we're not talking about keeping the street clean. We're not talking about, we want to ignore the Elliott Street complaint about not, that place is the word. I stopped cleaning that place because it was so trashed. That's Elliott Street, with the bar, with what he's talking about. So I can appreciate all the creative people that want this energy to go in a positive direction. But meanwhile, how come we can't get creative and clean the streets and keep these people from full-grown men down on Whetstone urinating behind the benches and passed out on the benches on a daily basis? Yes, they get chased out and they go somewhere else, but they come back and they do the same thing again and again. And I'm not talking about homeless. I won't even talk about homeless people because they're pretty awesome people. I'm talking about irresponsible grown-ups that are urinating behind the benches. And the police know about this also. So, like I said, I'll say again, I can appreciate all the creative energy we have. But let's focus on how we can keep the streets nice and clean because people actually notice how clean the streets are when they are clean. Thank you.
I mean, you were observing that yesterday, Tom, how clean Main Street.
Yeah, I was impressed with how clear it was. But what you're saying in the morning is when
that's when I go through and clean up the cigarette butts and the trash, and I've been staying off of Elliott Street because it's just too much. And there are a couple other people in town that they're fast walkers, like joggers and fast walkers, and they carry plastic bags with them, and they pick up trash every time they go around the block. They're picking up trash. They got two bags of trash every time they do their walks in the morning. 2 bags of trash every morning when they do their walks. All I'm saying, let's get creative and clean up the streets, and then all that other created energy, we're going to do that anyways because we have the energy. We certainly have that kind of energy in Brattleboro.
Well, I think it's also a little bit of a social issue too, that nowadays you're really not accountable for your actions. And I think that goes along with that.
You're not being accountable.
You're not being, but how do you change that? That's a whole mentality change, and it's that's going to take us a while, I think.
I realize that this affects Public Works, so I'm not sure which of the sort of band over there is Public Works, but
It's a guy in a white shirt.
Point the finger. Yeah. So I have no idea how many trash cans are there and what the effects are in terms of labor to actually get them emptied. And granted, some people are not going to use the trash can even if it's there. But if a trash can is there, some people are going to use it that otherwise might throw it in their car. It's the one broken window thing. So I'm just curious, from a budgetary perspective, from a logistics perspective, and maybe this is not the forum for that. Maybe this is just the forum for putting stuff out there. But you know, if there were, because Elliott Street seems to be a really big problem, far bigger than the rest. So anyhow, I don't know what the impact is of simply more trash cans.
We do have trash cans, and they're picked up with a regular rubbish removal Monday through Saturday. We do have a budget to add more containers. The last time we did a contract, we added into the contract additional containers that could be picked up as they were purchased. Cigarette butts are always a problem. Some of the merchants themselves have containers. The town does not have any containers.
So if you went Main Street to Elm Street, are there 2 trash cans or are there 10?
From Main Street to Elm Street, there's, I believe, 2 containers.
Yeah, I mean that's,
you know, if that.
For this problem, that's nothing, right? Who's going to walk a quarter mile to get to a trash?
Well, I guess one question I have, and again, I don't want to ruffle it too much, but we've worked with communities and they use their downtown improvement district funds to do basically a clean and safe program where instead of police patrols, it's basically, well, you have in Baltimore, but a uniformed, you know, but they're there to clean, they're there to help, they're ambassadors. They're there to clean, they're there to help a visitor, they're there to, you know, that's what we have right here. You're the ambassador.
Thank you. Do you have a uniform, Dept?
Unpaid ambassador. Okay.
Hello, I'm a Brattleboro resident for many years, but I also think that we should involve the business bars, especially bars, the top of the bars and restaurants. You go and enter a restaurant, the trash in front of the certain buildings where business owners are, especially bars and restaurants, is shameful. I'm sorry to say, but we have also Sam's cleans every morning. I see that properly back there clean. We have other business around there that pay little attention to that. And I understand that this is very important for the people who are coming from wherever they're coming from to shopping around. And I say, but look at the restaurants, it's busy, it's you name it. So I would like to reach out to the business owners, those who need to clean the front. There's a Chinese proverb that says, if every shopkeeper cleans the front clean, everybody will be
That gave every merchant on the street a push broom and a dustpan. Didn't help. Lead them to water.
Is there an ordinance or a responsibility requirement to keep your portion of sidewalk clean for property?
This sidewalk itself, but then when things go to curb line, that's where it starts to deteriorate. We do have a sweeper that cleans the downtown area twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. And that's an economic issue too. At one time, the sweeper did the downtown area 4 to 5 times a week. So it's kind of a level of service that you can provide. So over time, you know, we've decreased our level of service. That's why we have a volunteer. We did have seasonal help that actually cleaned the downtown during the summer months. Also, we had at one time we had two seasonal workers that worked basically from May into probably September. That all makes a difference. It's you know, the more you keep things clean, the cleaner it is. And also the trash containers. It's interesting because there's a lot of residents downtown, and the more containers you add, sometimes that invites more trash.
That's an issue we have in Baltimore. You put a trash can out, then people use it.
Residential users use them and fill them.
So it's a balance in there.
But it is effective. The more you have, it's definitely better.
I know there's a gentleman that was hired by the town that does the parking garage and does in front of the bars on Elliott Street and does the bus terminal street there. And then once in a while, I'll see him over in the whetstone, but not often. I do the whetstone because that is not being done at all. That's gross over there. I've called the town to get the steam cleaners to clean up behind all the benches on the corner there, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about. It needs to be steam clean. It needs to be something, anyways. That's another thing. But to come here and say that there's somebody that's on the street on twice a week, and I don't see anybody on the street twice a week cleaning the street. I see him at the parking garage, and he does a wonderful job. Wonderful job in front of the bars on the parking garage. I see him down there on the flat street. He does a wonderful job. He even scrapes gum off the walkway. He does a wonderful job. But that's what you're talking about, because I don't see anybody on Main Street or Elliott Street that's hired by the town to clean up the town.
No, I'm talking a physical machine, a sweeper.
Oh, the sweeper's wonderful.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
That's the only resource that we have.
Yeah, okay. And that takes care of the street, not the sidewalks.
That not only does the downtown area, but it does the parking lots, you know, on the outskirts of the downtown also.
Okay.
As somebody who has worked extensively with getting the flowers in place, and I can tell you that the municipality has made great strides, and with the street sweeper and keeping the Harmony lot, they had a crew down there every Saturday morning cleaning up the lot. It is 100% better than it ever has been. You know, when you're talking about people hanging around and out of the box thinking, Bill's not wrong. There are so many cigarette butts downtown. Maybe the select board should think about a non-smoking ordinance in the downtown district. Really something unique that's different. There are so many places that you cannot smoke. If you're in a park in a city, you can't smoke there. I mean, there are so many places that you can't smoke, and yet people come into our downtown. There's a lot of local people that hang around downtown. John is right. Lack of personal responsibility. We can't fix that. That's not what we can't, no matter what we say here, we're wasting good oxygen. We can't fix that problem. But we can make it a crime if we do have littering laws, that if somebody sees you throwing trash, they can be given a ticket. But maybe we look at having a non-smoking ordinance for our downtown. Let's be different. We haven't talked about, not one question have I heard in the earlier meeting or this meeting so far as, what are the positives for our community? All we talk about is the negatives. There's a lot of positives about our community, yet I haven't heard that question asked, and it should be asked because there's a reason that we're all here. There's positives that are going on in our community. We should hear about them and try to enhance the positives. And work on my weaknesses in golf, and I try to strengthen the things that I do well. And if we don't talk about the things that are good in our community, I think this whole effort today is for naught.
But to get a lower score, you really have to work on...
You got to be a better player.
You've got to be a better player on your weakest part.
That's right.
Okay, so, you know, we all know what our strengths are.
I don't think so.
And I
don't think that we talk about our strengths. Well, I hear everybody talking about the parking system is bad. They don't talk about the other asset, what causes the parking problems. We don't talk about why we have parking problems.
Right. So there's a saying in our business that if you don't have a parking problem, you have a downtown problem.
That's right.
Right.
So there are strengths in our community that maybe we take for granted. We never voice them so people don't hear them. We talk about the loitering. We talk about the trash. We talk about the graffiti. Those are problems that every community has. They have them. You guys travel around the country. This isn't unique to your ears. The issue is, what are the positives that we want to hear about that go along with the negatives? And each side, we try to lift up the other side, lift up the weaker side.
And if I could add to that, and John, you know I love you,
but I just wanted to...
But, well, it sounds like at home.
Love you, period.
Sounds like being at home.
I think to Dick's point, we who live in this town know what the positives are. So you assume, well, we don't have to talk about them here, because this is where we talk about negatives. The thing is, the people, Leanne and Trish and everybody else that's come from afar doesn't know what our positives are. So I think we need to go around and talk about what our positives are, because I don't want them to leave thinking, God, all these people have these bad things. Because I think part of what you're trying to accomplish, is come back with an action plan of what things we can do. But if they only know the negative things, I mean, you got to know the positive.
I know, but on the other side of that, it was nice for them to walk around on their own and pick out what they saw, what are the positives.
That was the question that was posed to us.
Right.
What are the challenges?
Well, that's why I'm asking,
where we
if
started
I would
out.
like to follow with Dick.
Answering the question.
Have you folks from now on make part of it, what do you like about this community?
Well, he did, and I forgot your first name. Tom walked around and said how clean it was downtown.
No, but I'm saying
And
that's great, but
it is.
there's another level of what's good about this community that only we can voice. I don't want them to walk away with and giving us a report saying, here's how we're going to help you solve all these negative things. But part of it is how can we work on the positives? So,
but I think that goes hand in hand with it.
Yeah, but let's that too is, and this is maybe a good way to tie up the last few minutes of this meeting, is look at opportunities and things that are ahead. So the opportunity may be, all right, we've got this strength, how do we build on this strength, where do we direct that ahead? You know, one of the things, having been here many times myself, you know, I always like bringing people here because their first impression when they arrive is, wow. You know, I mean, it's just immediate because of the vitality of having occupied storefronts and having a variety of businesses. And then, you know, some of the new things like, you know, when I first came here, the co-op was the old co-op, and having the new co-op and say, you've got to go in here, you've got to go into the Latchis and see what it looks like. So what are the opportunities as we look down the road for enhancement, maybe taking advantage of some of the changes that we know are going to happen? So
if you just look around the table, I mean, some of us are here because we have particular roles, but the number of people that would turn out to have a conversation, when you think about why taxes are high in this area, it's partly because we live in one of the most choicefully service-rich communities in this country. So we try as best we can as a community to not have numbers of people falling through the cracks. I think we attempt to look at our biases so that when we have an initial knee-jerk reaction of loitering, we might think, why is that group of people hanging out causing an uncomfortable feeling in me, and sort of look beyond that initial human reaction that other is dangerous in some way. And I think, you know, the other thing is I do a morning loop almost every day in this town. I walk 3 miles and I see you out picking up trash, and sometimes we talk about that issue, and I feel grateful that you're out there, that you care about what this community looks like, and that I can sit here and say yes, and you know, that is something that is a profound service to this community. You model that. I think there are other people like you who would like to be a part of that solution. And I can certainly, on my morning walks, pick up trash. I would be happy to do that. So we have a gorgeous, gorgeous community. It's physically and geographically beautiful. It's well situated. We look at energy issues. I think we're creative and forward thinking on so many issues. And I think really what we're doing here is our best offering. It's our attempt to maintain that caliber of lifestyle for the people that live here and the people who benefit from visiting.
And make it affordable.
And make it affordable.
Yeah. That gentleman over there wants to
I think it's interesting that one of the biggest reasons why the consultancy group here is to talk about post-Irene recovery, and you know, the Whetstone Brook is one of the most tremendous assets that we have. It's sort of like a spine running through the heart of our community, and I think, to your point, that's one of the most neglected areas of the town. You know, we turn our back to the Connecticut River, we turn our back in many ways to the Whetstone Brook, yet you have NEYT, you have the Music Center moving in, you've got what just happened with the Latchis and their capital campaign, and there is some recovery happening down on Flat Street. Yet, you know, we're not talking very much about the next storm. We're not talking about preparedness, and we're not talking about how there can be an overlay of the sort of the engineering that would go into potentially saving downtown from another catastrophic flood, while also maybe building in a recreation area, cleaning up that area, and embracing it as part of the community. You know, I walk behind the church building all the time, and more often than not, yesterday, and I'll tell you the God's honest truth, there was 3 people sitting back there with needles in their arms. There's shopping carts thrown into the creek. It's sort of like out of sight, out of mind, I think. I don't know who's taking responsibility for it, but you know, some sort of recreational corridor or something like that, where we can say, well, let's take one of our weakest links right now and really roll up our sleeves and turn it into one of the greatest assets, which Mother Nature has already given to us. We kind of just have to get back to where we were probably a couple hundred years ago.
Although we don't get all the sewage. Years ago. Down and look over the fence at the Whetstone. Look over the fence down into the river. Watch and look at all the trash down over that fence. And then there's a little garden that I tried to start a garden over in where the corner is. And you can't do anything with that because there's trash. And there's no gates. I don't know whether you notice I'm getting younger every day. And I can't climb the fence to clean up that trash down there, so it stays down there. It is gross. Look over the fence, please, down into the river and see all the trash. And I'm talking about the Whetstone right down here. You don't have to go far. And maybe we can get a gate there, or maybe we can get somebody to get down there and clean up that trash before another flood comes and cleans it up.
Is there a river keepers organization that takes care of?
We do have some volunteer organizations that do sweeps in different areas. Usually only happens once a year, but right. there are groups that get together and we assist them.
I was part of one at home where the big joke was how many tires we'd pull out of the creek every year.
But one last thing is if I call the Public Works and tell them there's a basket in the river, it's gone the next day or 2 days later. If I call the Public Works or the police department and complain about something, it's done the next day. But if we sit here and just complain and not call and let them know what's going on, they can't do a damn thing about it. So we can sit around and piss and moan all we want. Pick up the phone and complain and tell people, because they will get up and do their jobs if they know what they're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
You've got a comment, and then I've got a question too related to the Whetstone.
Okay, and this is stepping away from sort of garbage on Main Street and things like that. Statistically, Brattleboro and Windham County in general, but particularly Brattleboro, statistically is relative to income is one of the most expensive towns in the entire country because people don't earn much money. And right now we tend to mostly try to make up for that by low-income housing and assisting people that don't have enough money. And there's nothing I don't think we can do right now, but I would like us also to attack this problem from the other side and, you know, look at long-range plans about people actually making more money. Attracting jobs that aren't just service worker jobs, that aren't just food service jobs, so we can begin an export economy, export out of here into the rest of the country or the rest of the world. Because we can't only solve the problem from keep on lowering the standard.
Well, and I think you hit on an important strength that the community has is one of the things that I like about Brattleboro is I can fly into Hartford and be here in an hour and 15 minutes. You know, so my connection to the world is really easy here. And the quality of life, you know, it's a very enticing message to say you can live the Vermont lifestyle in a community that's a full-service community and yet have access to the globe. You know, as a consultant, that's a very appealing message. So how do we translate that into maybe spaces that are appropriate for entrepreneurs to locate? We know that the Mill Project, we know we've got new staff that's directing the credit corporation. I mean, so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, that we want to explore with that as well as we look at it.
As far as I know, no.
There's been discussions about long-term plans, but nothing's really been developed. There's a thought process to add that. It's pretty expensive to have the infrastructure too, but it's also been discussed versus having, a regular propane with all the smaller tanks. You have a distribution system. So,
but it's still very expensive. I know I converted a building in Brooklyn, New York to natural gas, 16,000 square foot. I'm like,
that movement's coming from Chittenden County down. The movement to have natural gas is coming from Chittenden County down this way.
I really believe it's critical for all the building owners in this town. What's happening at the moment in certain areas? And so,
It's 10 o'clock. My team has given me the wrap up. Just a couple things. 5 o'clock this evening at the Latchis is a public meeting. It'll be a very structured public meeting. We'll be asking a series of specific questions, both looking at, Kate, to your point, the assets. It'll be very asset oriented. I appreciate you bringing that up. We'll be talking about that, and then at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, also at the Latchis, we'll be doing our presentation. I know we'll be talking with a number of you through the coming days.